Hello everybody and welcome to Spellforce 3. Spellforce 3 is an upcoming real-time strategy game with RPG mechanics from Grimlore Games and published by THQ Nordic. The series has a long and turbulent history, with the first game releasing over a decade ago and the last piece of content being produced back in 2014 after multiple studio closures and acquisitions. Nordic Games, now THQ Nordic, are helping bring the series back to its roots and modernizing it. The game is scheduled for release on December 7th, 2017 and makes the point that you don't need to have played the previous games in order to enjoy it, but fans will be able to make connections in the story. So the game recently had a free weekend beta on Steam, which is where I've captured most of my footage here. So in this video I'm going to break down the gameplay and presentation of the beta to give you a taste of what the overall game will be like. Now Spellforce 3 is unlike any game I've ever played. The game blends RPG mechanics and RTS mechanics all in real time into one game mode. The game has a deep and story-driven campaign, which gives you greater access to RPG mechanics like loot, quests, and deeper skill trees for multiple characters, as well as fully voiced dialogue. There's also a more balanced and somewhat streamlined multiplayer skirmish mode for those who just want to get to the RTS side of things straight away. I'm going to break down my experiences with both, starting off with the campaign aspects first. In the beta mission, which I believe is a sort of prelude to the main campaign's events, you control Sentenza Noria, commander of the elite force of the Queen, the Wolf Guard. You're on a mission to recover an artifact from an ancient Hibernian city. You travel with an army, but have run ahead to find a place for the army to camp, and find out more about the rebel mages that are also hunting the artifact. The mission starts with a little bit of dialogue, where you're searching for the informant you're supposed to meet. You get to grips with the camera and movement controls, which work as they do for most RTS games. You have a sort of isometric view the entire time, but can fully rotate and zoom in for a closer look at the detail and the conversations. During these types of sections in the gameplay, Spellforce feels 100% like an RPG. You have multiple characters to control in your party, each with their own attributes and skill trees, as well as their own detailed equipment panels and statistics. Exploration and combat will lead to loot, allowing you to compare and equip different items on different characters. The loot has typical RPG values such as item rarity, potions, trinkets to sell, and items such as weapons have detailed statistics like damage, attack per second, critical chances, and types of damage. They often require you to be of a certain level to equip, so weapons scale up with your level, and a little bit of grinding is rewarded. You have a journal and a quest log, which allows you to track your current quests and tackle whichever ones you want first, though for the beta they were fairly linear. Characters have different types of attacks that you'll unlock in their skill trees, and these attacks can be hotkeyed in their active abilities panel. Each character has 3 main attacks, so when you build up to a party of 3 or 4, you can have a lot of attacks at your disposal with wide-ranging effects. The beta starts you off with a simple melee combatant and an archer, and you later acquire a dark mage and a priest, so you'll be tanking damage with your melee guy, attacking from range with your archer, casting buffs or area of damage with your mage, all while healing groups of troops with your priest. Characters have more than just 3 attacks though. They can be grabbed from the spellbook and rebinded to hotkeys if you want to use different ones for instance, but generally you choose the 3 that you want for any given fight. Combat also has a myriad of status effects that I've probably only scratched the surface for. The ones I did notice are slowdown, bleeding, poison, blindness, and so on. Pretty much the traditional RPG status effects all seem to be present here, and there's potions and counter spells to protect against this stuff. So as you can see, Spellforce doesn't compromise on depth when it comes to the RPG side of things. It might not be quite as deep as something like a Divinity Original Sin, but it's still pretty comparable. You wouldn't really expect there to be a whole other side to the game, but there is. After meeting with our informant, a dark mage, he took us further into the jungle to a clearing where we could set up camp. Admittedly, the conversation we had when we met him was pretty weird, as it was interrupted by a dragon that came out of nowhere, so once we took care of that, we pushed to the small town.
I suggest we take a look around while your soldiers set up camp. He should be nearby. That is, if these undead haven't taken him yet.
Fair enough. Go.
It's here that the game really opened up and became an RTS. Suddenly we had a city centre, workers and resources to manage. Now as this was my first encounter with it, I was fairly slow to learn how everything operated. I was just introduced to the RPG mechanics, which seemed deep enough to me, and then I was getting told how to play a sector-based RTS game, so it can be a little bit overwhelming, but I was able to manage and stuck with it until it all clicked, which didn't take too long as tutorials and help are really good. Now I'll cover the RTS side of things in just a minute. I just want to wrap up some of the last few mechanics in the RPG side of things. Once you build up your base a bit, you can explore the area much faster with scouts and infantrymen, and we were looking for Balthazar, a priest who knew how to unlock the temple gate that housed the artifact that we were looking for. On the way, I killed some random zombies that were plaguing an area because of this artifact, and I found a scroll which led to another quest for killing rebel mages. So it's pretty cool that not all quests are just fed to you, but some require you to find specific loot that will trigger them. Once we met Balthazar, we had to find 3 keystones to unlock the gate. Some of these stones were in enemy territory, so we had to push in with our armies after building up our resources and take them out. This is where the more traditional RTS mode came in. Of course, our armies were led by our RPG heroes as well.
Yes?
For the queen! Easy. Attack!
Other keystones required me to utilize our camp workers to clear out debris, which gave us access to unique areas where we could find them. Once we had all the stones, we needed to activate them by sacrificing some of our own men. This was a pretty cool little dialogue scene where our archer was uncomfortable with this dark magic, and so he abandoned us. We got the stones charged at the cost of 8 or so soldiers, and then finally opened the gate and recovered the artifact after a final boss fight.
What a beast.
There was a little twist in the story then. Our informant, the Dark Mage, turned out to be a spy who took the artifact and teleported away. This artifact apparently has the power to control minds, and this sowed the seeds for the start of the main campaign. Now, to be fair, it was a little bit predictable because, well, I mean, he is an evil looking guy and a dark mage, and he didn't seem to have all the info he should have at the beginning, but the story was interesting and I want to see where it goes. So I just wanted to give you a little taste of what the campaign is like and what type of missions you'll be embarking on. This mission alone, as I was learning, took me around 2 hours to complete, so it's a fairly chunky piece of gameplay. As someone who enjoys RPGs and RTS games, it's actually really nice to be able to almost flip between the two. Playing an RTS game with quests and heroes is like something I've never experienced before. Now we'll move on to skirmish mode, which is basically just a more focused RTS version of the campaign. You won't have quests or dialogue, but it'll be a straight up resource gathering and army building game, where you recruit heroes and have smaller skill trees for quicker games. All of the other mechanics present in skirmish are in the campaign. The buildings, units, and anything else are all in the mission that I just played, combined with the deeper RPG stuff. So I only played one game against the AI because it took me an extraordinary 3 hours to beat. Like I said, I was still getting used to things, so go easy on me. I basically hit the problem I do in most RTS games, where when I get to a certain size I stop expanding, but you need to be always pressing all fronts at all times. Normally I can see a game lasting from 30 minutes to maybe an hour, but I hit a stalemate with the AI that went on, and I wasn't going to give up. Honestly though, I enjoyed every minute of it. It really was a ton of fun. Coming from a game like Company of Heroes 2, where AI stalemates can take around an hour, it was something I really had fun with. Skirmish mode can be played against AI, online against players, or online against AI in co-op. There's 3 races, the orcs, humans, and elves, at least in the beta. You can change the amount of heroes you're allowed to get, the resource abundance, which will allow for longer or shorter games, and you can select campaign maps or skirmish mode scenario maps. So before we get into how everything plays out, I'll need to describe some of the core functionality. There are 5 resources to manage and collect: wood, bricks, food, iron ore, and Arya water. Then there's 2 refined resources: iron ingots, which you get from the ore, and Arya potions, which you get from the water. The map is divided up into sectors, and the sectors will have some of the 5 resources you're after. Sectors each have their own resource stockpiles also. So if you're chopping down wood in one sector, the sector will keep its wood unless it's needed elsewhere. So if you've stored wood in Sector A, and Sector B needs a new building, the wood will automatically be transferred over via horse and cart. You can set your home sector to stockpile resources so that all resources flow into a central hub and flow out where they're needed, but sometimes it's better just to let them go where they want. For instance, if one sector has an iron mine, and another has an iron smelter, it's better for it to just travel straight to there rather than go to your base and back out. So that in itself is a pretty unique premise. Resources don't all just go into a universal stockpile somewhere, they're actually treated as goods that travel between sectors. This leaves them open to raids and encourages you to think about where to place buildings. What makes it more tricky is that sectors have a finite amount of workers. When you capture a sector, you'll build an outpost. This is the building that stores the resources and keeps track of the workers. For instance, a sector may have 4 available workers. You can set them to work on the outpost, meaning they'll be carriers carrying resources around the sector by hand, or building new buildings if you place them. If you build an iron mine, you'll need to assign workers to that. Resource producing buildings typically have 3 slots for workers, so you'll have to unassign them from the outpost and assign them to the mine. Upgrading the sector will then cost some resources but give you more workers to utilize, so you can further develop the sector if you want. Further to that, sector's resources are finite. Eventually the iron, the wood, the aria and even the food will all run out, but later with technology you can make farms that sustain themselves. No other resource will sustain itself though. So this basically means that the game has to end eventually. Eventually you will run out of iron, which is needed to make good quality troops, and wood, which is needed to make buildings. So with those core principles explained, I'll explain some of the progression in combat. You start the game with a city center, which is your main building of operations, and it supplies 10 workers to the sector. There's also a godstone, which allows you to create a hero, and for each godstone you find, you can create another hero and teleport between them. Your home sector will also have a trader, which you can talk to in order to sell items and buy potions and weapons. There's 3 tiers of buildings that you'll progress through, from basic resource gatherers to better defenses, and eventually magic aria gatherers and military academies for the elite troops. Essentially, to make the best troops, you'll need to collect every type of resource and refine them through other buildings, so it's a large time investment. When you first discover a sector, there'll be enemy mobs in these sectors for your heroes to fight so that they can rank up early on. The further out from your base, I think the more powerful the sectors become, so you'll eventually need to take little armies to clear out the mobs as well. The types of units the humans can field at least are sword infantry, pikemen, archers and arsonists, then eventually reaching scout cavalry and knights with champions infantry and mentalist magic users. Owning around half the map grants you more population to work with, so I was able to field around 240 troops and have 50 workers, so the game can get pretty busy, and when it gets that busy it does tend to lag a little bit. The combat for me consisted of getting large groups together to do massive attacks through the portal gates, while siege catapults would lob rocks at buildings from afar. Stealing sectors and destroying sector outposts is how you diminish the enemy economy, and area of attack spells are perfect to stop players and AI blobbing up in large numbers. I feel like keeping your troops apart as much as possible is actually a great way to use them, because of the amount of magic and effects on screen sometimes. I have heard that the multiplayer can be over quite quickly and is a bit of a hero snipe game, but I've only heard this from one person so I'm not too sure, and I haven't experienced multiplayer so I just can't relate. The heroes I used frequently were downed, but combat still went on and hordes and armies were still thrown against each other in endless stalemates in my game, which as I mentioned I actually loved. I'm sure there is some meta that everyone is going to work out, but hoping the devs can try and balance it as best as they can without nerfing the heroes too much. Now the aim of skirmish is to destroy the enemy base, and from what I could see, there's plenty of tactics for doing that. You can use the teleport gates to rush around the map, do smaller raids on lots of sectors or resources, or focus massive blobs of troops into small defensive traps. The maps are really intricate and not just open plains, so terrain can actually be used pretty well to funnel people down defensive pathways and into your towers and catapult range. So that's pretty much it for the RTS side of things. It's got plenty of depth to it, with a lot of buildings and resources to manage on top of the hero management and the supply of multiple sectors and finite resources. I really feel like Spellforce is a deep game with a lot going on in it, and I really enjoyed my time with it, and I'm a guy that doesn't even really like fantasy. It should be apparent already, but I wanted to focus on the presentation of the game just for a minute. The game looks and runs great. The vegetation looks very realistic with grass and leaves blowing in the wind and reacting to character movement. The troops, enemy creatures and particle effects are on another level for an RTS game. The detail in the landscapes is brilliant, with clouds passing overhead, day and night cycles, different weather effects and depth of field effects, really making the scene pop and look extremely polished. The screen is never static, something is always moving, be it smoke, fire, water, wind or animals. And the texture quality really makes the ancient ruins stand out. Slabs of stone show their age with chips and cracks in the carvings. And I haven't seen it, but there's also desert environments and more that I look forward to checking out. The music is brilliant. I've been listening to the soundtrack online, and the voice acting also is great. I believe they got Geralt from The Witcher 3 to voice their main protagonist, which for some might be a bit weird, but I didn't really play too much of The Witcher, so he sounds pretty fresh to me. Lastly, I think the UI is extremely well done. No doubt it was difficult to combine RPG and RTS with a clear and concise UI. And though troop selection can be a little challenging at times, there's plenty of hotkeys, group controls and squad tools to manage them effectively. So that's it for my preview of Spellforce 3. I only played the free beta weekend, but I was extremely surprised at how good the game is and how much fun I had in it. I've been asked if the price is worth it, and from my experience I absolutely think so. The campaign weighs in at around 30 hours, and it's a tiny bit cheaper than a complete full price game, but has a huge level of quality and polish, and honestly is AAA standard to me in terms of its production value. Anyway guys, that's it for me. The game is out in around 2 weeks on December 7th. Let me know what you think of it, and if you'd be interested in seeing a full review, and I'll do my best to cover it. So thank you very much for watching. If you want to see more videos like this, let me know in the comments below, and let me know what you think of the game and if you'll be picking it up. Full-on reviews and smaller previews like this one are supported by an amazing dedicated group on Patreon. If you want to support this channel and help decide what games we cover, consider checking it out. Thanks again, and I'll see you in the next one.